Okay. Welcome everyone to our first candidate meeting with candidates from the state senate in the Charleston area, Tri Valley area. We've got candidates from District 4, District 8, and District 17 speaking with us here with a Gazette Mail interview. I am Kelly Merritt. I am editor of the Daily Mail opinion page, the right side of the two opinion pages of the Gazette Mail. We will begin shortly. We'll introduce ourselves, allow each candidate approximately 1 minute to introduce themselves, and then we will open it up for questions from the panelists of the Charleston Gazette Mail. Again, I'm Kelly Merritt, editor of the Daily Mail opinion page.
James Ackerman, politics reporter.
I'm Greg Moore, the executive editor of the Gazette Mail.
I'm Dawn Miller. I'm a Gazette opinion page editor. Thanks for coming.
My name is Amy Nicole Grady. I am an independent candidate for State Senate in District 4. I'm a teacher in Mason County. The reason I decided to run was I'm sure all of you have heard of this little thing called the work stoppage back in February. Upon talking to some coworkers and some other teachers in our county and other counties, I found out that they are really fed up with not feeling like they have enough representation from their perspective. And then as I've gotten into it deeper and I have talked to other citizens, I feel like they're the same way. They feel like they have too many people who have the interest of special interest groups instead of the regular citizens, so that's why.
I'm Dr. Eric Tarr, and I've been married 28 years, got 3 kids, I got a 20-year-old son, a 22-year-old son, and a 19-year-old daughter who's at Marshall. And I'm also a small business owner in Putnam County. And I'm Generations Physical Therapy Snack Fitness there in Maryland. And looking as my kids are now getting to the age where they're decided to come back to West Virginia, as a father, they're asking me, is this where I could come back and raise a family? And so it's been a lifetime of investment since I was 24 years old in West Virginia for our businesses to establish a generational business model for our family. Looking at the way West Virginia had been going was to honestly tell them that they should come back to West Virginia for the risk that it takes to raise a family here relative to opportunity that lies just outside our borders. And so when this election came around, I became semi-empty nester with my daughter going to college. And I thought that I have the expertise and experience to represent the state well and move it in the path of prosperity. And there's no way in the world I should be that to somebody else if I have that opportunity.
I'm Brian Prim. I'm a Democrat candidate for State Senate District 4. I live in Fraser's Bottom, where I have a cattle farm. I have a law office in Hurricane. I was here with all of you 2 years ago, and it turned out to be a very close race against Senator Carmichael. Honestly, did not expect to be back again, but was pushed by a lot of support to get back into this race, and it's quite simple. The residents in my district do not feel that they have a voice, a say, an ability to participate in the state government. They feel like the elected representatives are not representing, but rather just dictating. And that is the cry that I hear from all of them, and that is why I'm here today, and I thank you all very much.
Yes, my name is Richard Lindsay. I'm the Democrat candidate for the West Virginia State Senate. I live on Nancy Street on the east end with my wife and 2 little rambunctious little babies. The 8th district comprises Rand on the eastern side of the county, goes all the way through Charleston proper, Sissonville, Poca, Clendenin, Cross Lanes, into Buffalo, Red House, Eleanor, in the Putnam County. And I'm running because I believe that the West Virginians deserve a government, a state government that's competent and also that creates as much opportunity for folks as possible. You wouldn't have to read the papers too long to know that West Virginia is the most distressed state, according to a recent report, out of the entire Appalachian region, and to know that we have 25% of people in poverty, and we have wages lagging in comparison across our contiguous states. That needs to change. I think the government should, if its role should be to work for the people, and again, to create as much opportunity and social mobility so that everyone has a chance to achieve the American dream. Thank you.
I'm Ed Gonch. I'm a native of Boone County, a coal camp in Boone County, a little place called Ridgeview. Grew up there, had a wonderful upbringing, went to Sherman High School, was the first member of my family to go to college, was privileged to go to West Virginia State now university, where I received a wonderful education. I've lived in Charleston about 52 years almost, married to the same woman, my wife, a wonderful wife, Marilyn, be 52 years in January. I have 2 children who fortunately are still in West Virginia, 5 grandchildren, and only 2 of them are still in West Virginia. I ran for the Senate 4 years ago, was successful. Since then, I've become chairman of the Senate Government Organization Committee. I serve on finance, on pensions, on enrolled bills, on rules, on transportation. I might be forgetting one. I believe West Virginia is at a tipping point, and I would like to have one more opportunity to see our state move from that tipping point to progress. I think our economy is growing, but I think we have some real problems that still need to be addressed, and I'd like to be part of the solution.
Well, I'm Terrell Ellis, and I'm the Democrat candidate for the 17th district. The 17th district in Charleston includes South Hills and Canal City, includes all of the Upper Canal Valley on both sides of the river, South Charleston, St. Albans, and all the way up Elk River to Clendenin. I'm a single mother, raised 4 beautiful daughters here in Charleston, and I've lived here for 40 years. This is my adopted home. I love West Virginia, and I'm running because I think we can be better than what we are right now. Right now we hear that we're on kind of the road to an economic recovery. We hear about the fact that our GDP has increased and our unemployment rate has decreased. But when you really look behind the numbers, they don't really tell the story. We still have, as Rich mentioned, too many people living in poverty and low wage rates. My professional background is in community and economic development. I've worked all around the state, and I think I understand what communities need to be livable. I understand what businesses need to be able to prosper in this state. And I happen to think that the current leadership in the legislature is not really touching on the key issues that we need to be focusing on. And so I'm running to bring my skill set to the legislature in community and economic development to help move West Virginia forward. So I think we need to be investing in things like education and workforce and our small businesses that are the backbone of our economy. And instead, I think we're focusing too much on some of the more divisive issues.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Tom Chicubo. I'm currently serving as the Republican Senator in the 17th District here in Kanawha County. I'm also chair of the Senate Health Committee. I grew up in Chattanooga, West Virginia. Went to Marshall University, went to med school at West Virginia Osteopathic. Did residency through WVU Charleston, so I've kind of that was all 3 major universities or medical colleges here in the state. I joined the Senate in 2014, and I was fortunate enough to be elected by the voters. And I got into it more from probably the medical and economic aspects. At the time, the ACA had just been put into play. There was putting heavy stress and burdens on hospitals, physicians, offices, and patients. And so, over the past 4 years, I think we've done a tremendous job. The state, compared to where we were in 2014, it's a stark contrast, I believe, where we were just simply 4 years ago, but it is a monumental task. And so the economic growth that we've seen over the past 12 to 24 months especially, to me, is why I ran again. We've started good progress, and I'd like to be part of that to continue. There's a lot of work to be done, especially on the medical forefront. Healthcare is a situation where it affects everybody. And so having those expertise and bringing them to the Senate and trying to help the well-being of everybody is why I'm trying to represent not only Kanawha County, but West Virginia for another term.
All right, I want to go right to left opposite order here. I want to ask, there's some signs of life in the economy, but there's still, like it's said, very high poverty, very low workforce participation. Young people are leaving the area. What can you do from the State House to bring jobs back and retain young people?
So I think the first thing we've got to do is, well, several things. There's issues with tort reform, bring businesses back. There's things we still need to do with our tax structure to encourage businesses to come back. One of the bills that I was extremely excited about last session that did come to fruition was the CTC bill, College and Technical Community. A lot of the problems we're having with poverty, with drug abuse, with hopelessness in the state can be fixed with education and with giving. So many times we've said there's more to a paycheck than just money. And so that college and technical community college bill, that would have taken displaced coal miners, especially in my part of the state, in southern part where I grew up, would have taken single mothers, you know, they could become nurses, they could become electricians, they could become plumbers. And when you do that and you give these guys jobs, and I certainly understand when these coal miners say, hey, I was making $70,000, and now all of a sudden they want me to the burgers I can't afford, the car payment, the house payment, go kids through school with that. I understand that, but if we can do incentives like that, get these guys back and retrain, where they continue to do that, then a lot of the issues that the state suffers from lower tax base, which is where we get most of our money from, starts to resolve.
Can you just briefly explain that CTC bill, what you're talking about?
So what we were trying to do with that is basically provide free college and technical school to all West Virginians. Now you have to qualify, you have to be drug-free, be able to pay for that education. Now you have to apply for federal grants. If you didn't apply for those things, state West Virginia would step up and retrain you to get your school. Now, there was caveat that you had to stay in West Virginia and give back to West Virginia. If you wanted to leave, that's fine. You just pay us back for what we invested in you, which I think is a very reasonable incentive. It's occurred in Tennessee. It's been a very successful program, and I think I'm still encouraged that hopefully we can get past this year.
Excuse me. Senator, you said there are issues with tort reform, specifically what issues are you talking about, what we might see down there for the next 4 years?
Well, there's things when you talk about, for example, the medical community, we've done a lot in the past 4 years. When the malpractice crisis hit in 2003, for example, some of that stuff has been whittled at. There's been loopholes. We closed some of those. So, for example, when you look at comparative fault bill that we passed, I think it was in 2015, or when you look at the patient injury compensation fund was closed down, I mean, those are things that we've got to continue to work for on the medical forefront. On business, there was other issues. I can't remember the bill numbers right now, but for example, if somebody breaks into your property and they can sue you when they shouldn't have been there, they're breaking in. You can't do that anymore. If they're allowed to be in property premises and working and open and obvious if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. And so when you talk, when our leadership, we met with Fortune 500 companies and they said, you know, what's the big hurdle to keep you from coming back to the state? One of the biggest things was not our tax structure, but it was tort reform. Come here and get sued for everything. So we've tackled a lot of those issues. There's still more to be done. But I think the progress we've made has been recognized. Your Chamber of Commerce, go to West Virginia is the most improved state in the country for what we're doing.
Thank you. I work every day out in the field talking to businesses, so I think I understand some of the issues that they're facing. And what I hear repeatedly is that they don't talk about taxes as much as they talk about the fact that we don't have a workforce that's skilled and trained. And so I think there are some significant improvements that need to be made to our workforce development initiatives. And I think in doing so, that's going to give young people the opportunity to stay here and work. What I find really interesting is that when you talk to business and industry, there is not really a systematic way for them to connect with the community college system, with the vocational and technical education schools. They're not having a regular dialogue so that they can start talking about not only the job skills that they need today, but the job skills that they're projecting in the future. And I just think at the state level, we need to do a better job of making those connections. And I think the State Department of Education is taking a first good step in doing that. They've created an Office of Economic Initiative where they're connecting the Department of Commerce to the workforce training providers in the vocational school system. So that step has been taken. I just think it needs to be strengthened. And I think there's some models out there around the country that we can look to we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The other thing that I will say is, I mean, I think we pay a lot of lip service to small business. it was interesting that I attended the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce Business Summit this year. And it was very interesting that their agenda was primarily a discussion about education, workforce development, and small business. And that is the agenda that I have been touting since I filed to run for office. Small business is the backbone of the state, but yet we just pay lip service to it. 87% of the businesses in this state employ fewer than 20 people. And what we don't do a very good job at is providing them with the structure that they need to be able to flourish in the state. So trying to understand how they can better access their markets, trying to provide them with the infrastructure they need to, if it's more access to broadband, accelerators, business incubators, access to funding, being able to provide funding so that people can commercialize their ideas that they have. And when we talk about young kids coming out of college, many of them have great ideas, but they get lost. We lose them in the system somehow, and we're not able to grab those ideas, help them commercialize them, and move them forward. So I think strengthening all of that. Right now, we put a very limited amount of money into the small business development centers. And that's a partnership with the federal SBA. And we try to get by with about as little funding as we can in that system. And that needs to really be ramped up significantly, as well as some other programs to support that.
Political candidates are noted for saying we're great at one-liners like we want to create jobs. That's what we want to do. And after 4 years of being in the legislature, I'm convinced more than ever that government doesn't create jobs. Government can create an environment where business can flourish and jobs can be created as a result of the policies that were implemented. I think it would be well for us too to look back at where we've come from. My first day on the job in the legislature, we were faced with close to a $500 million deficit. And in the first 2 years, we cut the budget, actually. We reduced the state budget. Didn't make much fanfare out of that, but we were scraping to make ends meet. And now, I think it also would be well to acknowledge, while we still have substantial problems, we have the 11th highest wage growth rate in the nation since the Great Recession. There's been progress. Personal income tax collections are up 6.4% in the last 2 years. We have the 8th highest GDP growth in 2017. 16,000 jobs created in 3 years. The unemployment rate has dropped from 6.8 to 5.1. But having said all of that, what's been said before is still true. We still have 25% of our population in poverty, which is unacceptable. You haven't asked this question, but it's obvious it's coming at some point. I'll try to answer it before you ask me. What is the biggest issue facing the state? It's the drug epidemic. Because it affects so many areas of our state. It affects our workforce. It affects our poverty rate. It affects the number of children who are without parents, who are in the foster care system. It affects and college going rate. It affects kids' grades in school, truancy. All of those things are so heavily impacted by this drug epidemic that we have to declare war on it and tackle it head on. Now, I have thoughts on that, but I won't get to them at this point. Maybe later we can talk about those further. But it would be crazy not to think about where we've come from. I mean, we were in a huge hole, and we're now at least back to where last year we had a surplus of some $28 million, give or take. So that's a huge progress, and we're starting to see some indicators that show we're on the right track. And I'd like to make sure we stay on that track, which is why I'd like 4 more years.
Yes, I think that's Mr. Zuckerman, that's a very good question to open up, and it can, as Ed pointed out, you can carry it to just about every issue that affects West Virginians. I think the first thing we have to recognize is that We have to address the problem and our shortcomings truthfully. Any wage growth, from what I understand that we've seen in this state, is a consequence of the gas industry. And I'd like to remind folks who always tell me, whenever it's suggested that the gas sales tax should be raised in order to pay for PEIA, I'm always told, well, it's a volatile market and you just can't depend upon it year to year. So again, it's a volatile market that you can't depend upon year to year, and it only affects a certain and small percentage of West Virginia. So any wage growth in that regard hasn't come to West Virginians. And I would suggest and submit to anyone listening here that the reason why the teachers were successful in keeping public support during the work stoppage, I know because I went through when I talked to folks when I was campaigning, was because folks who were making minimum wage said, those teachers are speaking for us because they deserve a decent wage. They deserve a permanent fix to PEIA, and if they can do it, I want to do it too. That brings us back to minimum wage. Right now in West Virginia, the minimum wage is $8.75 an hour, which is $18,200 a year. I don't know how one individual survives off that, much less a family of four. And people who make that money, not only do they not have money to save, not only do they have dispensable income to put back into the economy, but they also qualify for public benefits. So we have a system where politicians say we need to protect industry, we need to protect big business, while at the same time big business is still paying people meager wages, and the government's having to pick up the bill on the wages that aren't being paid. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is education and skills. I think anyone from any party can point to one biased report over another, but every unbiased report that I've ever read that comes to, that speaks to where companies locate, the number one requirement is that wherever they locate, whatever state they locate or community, you must have an educated and skilled workforce. And we don't have that. So I agree with Terrell, we need to put resources in our workforce. I would suggest that one thing we can do is not go in the other direction. My opponent, Ed, wrote an op-ed in the July paper of the Gazette. He talked about how in Mississippi they lowered the requirements for certification for certain skills and apprenticeships, and they lowered the fees. Well, the problem with that is, one, the public gets a deficient product because the people producing it, whatever it is, aren't skilled to begin with. And two, it draws down wages and skill level of those workers. So we need to go in the opposite direction in that regard. The opioid crisis, I'm sure there's going to be a question, but I feel like I need to respond since we have so many folks who still have yet to answer. I don't know how long we're going to be here today. But the first thing that we must do with the opioid crisis is be available and listen to people. I was at a forum not too long ago, and I listened. And there was an open dialogue. There needs to be leadership on this issue. Someone shouldn't just be able to come into an interview or debate and say it's a horrible issue. Where's the movement been? We have the legislature created in 2017 the Office of Drug Policy Control. They don't have a leader, and they were supposed to issue a report in July, and I haven't seen it. The leadership's responsibility in the legislature is to make sure that's the bare minimum that should be done for the people of West Virginia.
Let's get back there really quick.
Sure.
Let's let everybody else finish. Can I get a real quick follow-up though? Were you proposing raising the minimum wage through legislation, and if so, where to?
First off, it would have to be over a period of time. I think anywhere between $13 to $15 an hour would be sufficient, because then you're getting around $30,000 a year. And at that point in time, people would have, again, disposable income to either save for an education down the road for their children, or be able to put that money back into the economy.
We did plan roughly for an hour for the whole thing, so that would be, got a little more than a half hour to go.
We can go on.
Yeah, we can go on.
Okay, getting back to the original question regarding the fact that the state really hasn't recovered, and what do we do about it? I think the answer is education, and it's the education system. That should be the number one priority and the number one investment that this state makes. Since I've been running my own business and my law practice and taking an active interest in what's happened in Charleston. I've seen attacks on individuals through what is called tort reform, that is really just a way to help companies get out of liability.
Say tax on.
Attacks, not a tax, attack. I've seen them attack workers through the right to work prevailing wage. We discussed at length when I was here 2 years ago. And none of that has really solved the problem. But what has never been looked at and would not have even been on the radar this year, but for some issues with PEIA and then the teachers raising a ruckus, is the fact that our education system is neglected and woefully underfunded. And that needs to be priority number one. And when people talk about the jobs coming, yes, we need qualified, educated workers, and that would certainly be improved through having a better education system. But I have information firsthand from people and businesses in other states that say some of the reasons they don't come to West Virginia is because they can't get their upper level employees to come to an area where the education system is considered so poor to bring their children and be living in the communities. And I think it's also why we see there are certain pockets of the state that get some of the new business, and it usually coincides with the school systems. If you were asked folks in education would say those are the better funded, better ran school systems in the state, and that's because that's where the businesses want to be. So we need to, and this isn't about a teacher raise, this is about the children. I do a lot of work at county fairs throughout the state, and I meet a lot of kids, and they come from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of home lives. And what I can say is every single one of them has potential if put in the right situation. And so many of them don't have that opportunity at home, and any opportunities they do get comes through what they get every day when they're in the classroom with the teachers and the AAs and people like that. And that's got to be the focus. This politics of trying to attack unions or lawyers or businesses, we've got to put that aside and just work as West Virginians. What we would all do if there was a disaster, we would all run to help. And it's time we do that, because I do think we have a disaster when it comes to education right now, and we need to all work together, roll up our sleeves, and go after that. Thank you.
And Jay, that question was really close to home. When I introduced myself, I mentioned that I have a 20-year-old, 22-year-old, and a 19-year-old. So I have children of my own that are get to the age, is this where I'm coming back home to? I did a radio interview not long ago, and on a break in the interview, one of the producers on a radio show was a 25-year-old. He had a wife and child. And he was contemplating whether or not he was going to stay in West Virginia. And he asked me, he said, Eric, he said, tell me why I should stay in West Virginia. He said, I'm the millennial, I'm the one staying here, and think about raising my family, tell me why I should stay. So you're asking the wrong question. The question you should be asking is how do we fix this state so you don't have to ask that question. I said, do what makes you happy. And I tell my son, I said, you're planning for career development, and you're looking at your future. You do what's most opportune, where you can have a family that can grow, and you don't have to risk your future to raise that family. And I said, that's where men of my age and women of my age and people that are looking at leadership in this state to come up to make a difference, that's where the responsibility falls on us as a legislator. The simple answer on how do you get there, although it's stated simply, not done simply, is economic diversification. So I started my first business when I was 24. And it was me and my mom and my first family business. And since then, I was back in 97, we've diversified into 10 different industries going through. And we did that through looking at needs that were in the community, looking at needs that were in businesses around us, and then fulfilling those needs. And so we went from a physical therapy practice into real estate, into construction, into retail sales, into building material sales, into marketing, into entertainment companies. All that had synergies with the assets that we started with from our first company was 24. I understand how to diversify. I've been doing this since I was 24. Almost 200 jobs. When you're doing that, so in that process, in that history, one of the things I've learned is that West Virginia is one state, West Virginia. They're looking for ways to stay in West Virginia. In our physical therapy, rehab, fitness side of our practice, we have young professionals that come in that we take from the school, teach at Marshall, I teach business there. I'm interacting with 25-year-olds who are now 25, 26-year-olds, 27-year-olds who are coming out with a doctorate. And looking at, is this where I want to work? One of the things that we've done with our businesses is that we take students, sorry, it's an here. We take students within our businesses and we have apprenticeships, internships, residencies, and we model that into some of our other businesses outside of what we just do with physical therapy. So we only have students come in. I might have them for 3 weeks, I might have them for 3 months, depending on where they come from, because they come from all over the country, really. And for physical therapy assistant, for athletic training, for physical therapist, for exercise physiology, those type of things. So I've been professionally raised in an environment where you educate people and you're really trying to retain them to your businesses, right? Because those are people that are hard to bring into West Virginia from outside the state, especially when they can step across the border and make so much more, and it's so much harder to come back to West Virginia if you want to, because you're going to take some sort of cut in order to come back and be able to live it. That's the risk. We have a lot of opportunity for the diversification coming down through us with, we have natural gas sitting under our feet that is on a global scale competitive with any other country in the world. That downstream industry that can come from natural gas development, comes from petrochemical, is a boom for economic diversification. And I understand that. I've been doing it since 24 years old.
To follow there, it sounds like you found some success with your private businesses diversifying, but how do you translate that to public policy?
It's looking for, because with those businesses, I've had to fight public policy essentially since I was 24 for the regulations and laws in the state that got in the way of being able to do that. So you have to get the government out of the way, first of all. That's one of the big things you need to do in order to allow it to happen. The second thing is you got to understand, and this is where my life experiences, my occupational history comes into play, is you have to understand where the synergies lie. A lot of times when you're looking at policy, you're looking at how the ground effect of that policy affects another policy, or how it affects people's jobs on the ground, how it affects industry on the ground. That's something I have real talent for. So when it comes back to the policy side of it, you got to look at every policy and see how it affects practically paycheck somebody's taking home. How does it practically affect the business being able to open? Does that policy also improve the ability of another industry to grow as well? And quite frankly, I think the legislature's passed on a couple of those opportunities in the past decade, probably much longer before I started paying attention.
Can you give an example there, just that really grounded?
Sure. So one of the things that we had come up to the legislature at one point was Tesla was looking at how we get in West Virginia. And that was quite controversial within the leadership between Republicans and Democrats, and within the Republicans themselves, and those type of things. And the battle there was that we've had protectionism policy in West Virginia for so long. It's the ones that are running the businesses now here really trying to protect that turf. As long as you can protect it, don't let anybody else in, hey, you're fine. Well, that's driven us down into the dirt. So one of the reasons that didn't happen, in my opinion, from what I saw, is that it wasn't pursued for the opportunity that it was to have a company that had never touched West Virginia come in and possibly invest in a major way. The bigger thing was how do we protect? Well, we can do both. You can protect the industry in West Virginia, and you provide opportunity for new technology, new industry, new jobs to come into West Virginia. And to me, it was passed over to.
I've heard several candidates, actually a couple candidates mention that the oil and gas industry in our state and natural resources can provide jobs. That's correct. I believe in that also, but only if those jobs are going to West Virginians and not to out-of-state workers, which is happening right now. So we need to make sure that those jobs stay with our people and not from surrounding states. Okay. I've also heard several candidates on the way down here couldn't help but listen to everybody. I'm the last one to speak. So they talk a lot about education, how we need education. We absolutely do. That is my business. That's what I know. I'm not a businessman, I'm a teacher. And I heard Brian mention that we need to educate our kids, that every kid needs to know that they have potential. Absolutely. Every kid needs to know they have potential. Now, with that said, we need more education talking about technical skills and trade schools. All these jobs, the working class and the middle class created West Virginia, made West Virginia our state, okay? We need to quit pushing college so much on all these children. I'm a teacher. I have kids that I know probably aren't going to go to college. That's not their thing, you know? We need to push them in a direction where they know that they're going to be successful and they know that they can have a job and hold one. Often we have discussions about why it's important to have a job. And you know, if you want nice things, I try to put it in perspective. You know, I teach fourth grade. So a lot of times it's, I want a Camaro, or, you know, something like that. So I make sure I tell them, well, if you want that Camaro, you've got to have a job. And you'd be surprised at some of the answers I get. Well, why do I need a job? My dad doesn't have a job. He sits at home. He gets a check every month. I hear that often from several kids in my area. And I think we've got to stop that way of thinking. We've got to educate these kids that that's not how the world works. You know, it's not a free check. It's not a free check. Somebody is paying for that. So you need to take care of yourself and be responsible for yourself and your family. So I think that starts, we need to get some like technical skills and some trade skills more into high schools, and where we have more classes where kids can opt into those so they can get some skills before they actually go out into the workforce. I do believe that we need to go back to that. I'm not downing college at all, absolutely not. I want to push all my kids to be the best they can be, but some kids are just better at being hands-on. And you know, they're going to go in a way that it's a trade, something that they need to do and they feel successful. That is the main thing. So we need to focus on that. Now, I did read somewhere that, you know, was it Mr. Bond just said we had 25% of our workers are poverty level. And I read somewhere that out of that 25%, 57% are at or below minimum wage. That's not okay. And we expect people to be able to live if they're at or below minimum wage. So, you know, we've got to educate these people and kids so that they will feel like they can do a better job. And then, you know, it's not okay just to sit and not have a job and not want to provide for them, for everybody else to provide. So I think education is the main goal. We should focus on that.
One of this, another reason to subscribe. Last one.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about teachers, PEIA. I want to hear specific solutions for how to fund PEIA. We're district by district. I think I'll start with District 4. So who District 4 wants to go first? All right.
Well, I am a PEI policy holder, so this personally affects me and my family.
Right.
It's something that when I talk to citizens, it's one of the first things that comes up. Just when I'm going door to door and I'm talking to people in our district, there are so many PEI policy holders, and they're really concerned about that. I had a goal in mind. You know, obviously we've heard all about the severance tax. You know, increase the gas severance tax, and that's the first in my mind. But then I talked with an independent owner in Ripley, Ravenswood, Ripley area yesterday, and she talked to me and gave me a little different perspective on the severance tax. She employs 18 people. You know, they're a small company, and she was concerned about if that severance tax was raised. She said sometimes we're barely keeping our head above water. So, you know, we got to keep in mind that there are small companies out there that are barely surviving, even though it's the oil and gas industry. And we've got to keep that in mind. If we increase that severance tax, that also increases it on them. So I was thinking if we could tier it in some way, you know, have it a tiered level so that it does not affect the small businesses or small companies as much as it does those large companies that are making multi-million dollars off of it. It could possibly work. I'm investigating other ways, but I'm still leaning towards the severance tax on my end. But also, like I said, keeping in mind that it can affect small independent companies, and we need to make sure that we're not taking anything out of their pockets.
Who else is important?
Yeah, so I'm a physical therapist by trade, so I've been dealing with PIA on multiple levels since I was 24. I've had patients that come in with PIA, and as a therapist, concerned about their well-being. It's very important they have coverage for the services they need, whether it's a physical therapy or referrals we make. I also employ people, so I understand how critical it is to have healthcare benefits for employees and what that means to us. I also pay for those benefits for our employees, and so I know when we go out shopping, we look at quality, we look at the value of the plan, and what that value means for the success of the employer to be able to operate, because the expense they want to provide for their employees. Versus actually what it provides for the employee if they need to go in to get it, whether it's well, health check out or they have something that's a crisis situation for family that needs covered. So I've been around that payment policy for a long time, so what happened with PIA, that's fine. There's also a fiscal accountability and fiscal responsibility side to government, I think that's lacking. And it's been a challenge to go after the PIA. For one of the reasons is that PIA has been a political football for years. If you want to do anything to upset the apple cart on a bill, attach it to PIA. And so if you're going to do that, that creates instability. If I were to make every decision that I didn't want to mess with in the businesses and attach it to our health insurance plan, I wouldn't keep employees. So I understand people when PIA can get extremely upset about how it's tossed back and forth and not having stability from year to year.
So what specifically would you do to fix the problems?
First of all, there's things we've done with examples already, not we've done, but the legislature, we as West Virginia, with people who put up there so far. DHHR, one of the things that is they went in and they looked at their pharmaceutical benefits. So PIA right now do not reach across state lines. It's contained within the state. With DHHR on Medicaid, this is an example, by that plan being able to go across state lines and capture their risk pool, they're also able to manage their own pharmaceutical benefits. This past year, doing that alone, they saved $70 million in a year. That's a year. That kind of stuff we're not doing with PIA. So why in the world would you go raise taxes on PIA when you're sitting there throwing money away now? So that's just one touch of it that can happen. The other thing is that we've had history when we've had other political footballs in the past. And PIA is mostly privatized at this point now. If you look at it, it's farmed out. It's HealthSmart is who does a lot of that. There's a lot of parts of it that are farmed out. But the administration of it is still our governor, our executive branch government, who shouldn't be in the insurance business.
So you'd like to see it privatized?
I'd like to see it look at for privatizing it and look at the investigation of where we can improve stability, where we can provide improved value for less cost, and make it an insurance plan rather than the way it's currently structured, which is set to fail. It is set up to fail the way it's structured from day one. As a healthcare provider, as an employer, somebody purchases insurance, I've seen that for decades.
Okay, and my mother, lifetime teacher, so I'm familiar with the issues with PIA from that front. I think we all in the room agree that's something we can talk about here for days, not just a few minutes, and none of us would come up with good answers to how to fix it. It has to be priority number one to work on it. I am against privatization. I have represented numerous labor union, health, and welfare funds. I know the benefits of when you take profit out of the insurance business, and the goal is to how best to provide benefits to the participants rather than how can we make a profit off of this plan. I just think that would be a recipe for disaster. I think that the ideas that maybe were floated around when you started the task force are admirable, and the fact is though it needs to go into action. There just has to be meetings to figure out how we are going to fully fund this. Obviously, there are severance tax options that I think absolutely should be looked into. We're getting ready to have what appears to be quite a boom in the oil and gas industry, and we need to take advantage now while we can before it's too late. Because this isn't just a teacher issue, this is all state employees, and it's concerning to all of them. You've got issues that, like for example, when this session and bill was passed out of the Senate, did not move on to an intermediate court of appeals with fiscal area $10 to $13 million. Any attorney that does it for a living in the state would say that's totally unnecessary. That was a political bill, and I still don't understand the reasoning why, but that right there was a waste of money that could have been invested towards PDIA, which again was not an issue. It was not on the radar of the Senate or the legislature as a whole when the session started last year. So you've got those things to look at, and you've got to involve all parties. Again, the teachers that I talk with, the public workers, the state police who endorse me, every day when I meet with them, they just want to be part of the process. They're willing to talk about specifics within that plan that would say that if a spouse makes over a certain amount of money, there are different rate charges. They want to be part of it. They're not saying that this is something they want for free or something that they want to be part of the plan, not just hear this, we're going to do the task force, we're going to listen to you, and at some point we're going to tell you what we're going to do. So it's not an easy fix, and I don't think anyone's answers have been wrong in their ideas. It's just a matter of we have to work together and track results.
Okay, I'd like to jump down to District 17, start the incumbent, fixes for PEI, what do you like?
That's a tough question, you know. I would be interested to hear what the task force comes back and comes up with. You know, the challenge with PI is, it's a dual balance here, because on one side, you have state employees that, are working for the state, oftentimes with, lower wages than maybe what they would be making in the private sector, for the benefits package. And on the other side, you've got the rest of the people in West Virginia that's basically subsidizing the state employees. And so, I'll just take nurses and respiratory therapists and people in hospitals. If you do an apples to apples comparison, PI health benefits are probably 40% or less than the rest of the people in the state with companies and private insurances and stuff are paying. So it's all already heavily subsidized by the other people in the state that doesn't get PI. And so, you know, we heard a host of things, you know, make it free or fully pay for it. Well, we're paying our 80%, always have. The problem is healthcare costs continue to climb. And so the real answer for whether you're talking about PI or other insurance companies is how you control those costs. And the problem is we're the unhealthiest, most obese, and the oldest state in the country. All of those three things really drive up healthcare costs. You know, you can't legislate healthy living. You can certainly incentivize it, which is what PA is trying to do, and what many private insurance companies are trying to do. With Life 360, which is what, you know, kind of started race in the first place. But I think it was rolled out very poorly. But basically, what they were trying to do was what many insurance companies do is try to give incentives. You can't legislate, you can't force somebody to be healthy, but you can certainly incentivize them if you're willing to do things. Go to your doctor, get your labs, stop smoking, lose some weight, keep your weight control. Healthcare costs will be a lot less. The problem is West Virginia rolled it out as more of a penalty instead of and that's what got people upset, right? So nobody likes being told, especially regarding their health. But the concept of what they were trying to do is valid, and that's going to have to be looked at. In terms of taxes and things like that, you know, I agree with Eric Tarr. We need to look at how costs contained, because taxes should be a last resort. The first time I ran, I was criticized by both my Republican and Democrat colleagues that were not signing the pledge to never raise a tax. I'm Republican. That's the last thing we'll ever want to do. However, I think it's very irresponsible for anybody to say under no circumstances would you ever raise taxes, but it should be done as a last resort, and it should be done in a way that you're getting the most bang for your buck. So in terms of PIA, we're going to have to look at trying to get those costs in better control. And what I think a lot of people in the state don't understand, it's one of the few insurances in the country that is based on what you make. It's not based on risk. So if the state was in the car insurance business and we were paying everybody's car insurance, and you had a group of individuals that were racing around getting car wrecks, getting tickets all the time, and the rest of the taxpayers were having to subsidize that over and over and over, they wouldn't stand for that. PI is one of those things where you can't really get free of those costs you're paying with the state. But looking at things like Eric Tarr mentioned, pharmacy benefit plans, looking at things to streamline, you get medical homes or providers, so you're not just talking with an individual group, but you're talking with a group of physicians and local hospitals work together to try to limit those costs, keep people healthier, so that they're not bouncing back into the hospital, they're not using higher price drugs. It's a complicated issue. I'm a physician, and it's very complicated. And regardless of whatever concept or idea we come up with is working today, that can change pretty quickly. Outbreak of something occur, you let so it's complicated. And then on top of that, you have the stress on the system of the fact that the AC came along, and so much private companies kick spouses off their insurance plans. If you work for a company, you had good insurance. But if your spouse couldn't get insurance, you were kicked off their plan. So what that did to a lot of people is forced a lot of people on the back of the PIA. And again, it's one of those insurances that it's all based on what you make. And so, part of the shared cost of that and keeping that is how you afford it. And when you've got more and more people come on the system, and they're already paying premiums at 40% of what the private market is, it makes it tough on the rest of the taxpayers in West Virginia. So it's complicated. I don't have an exact answer. I don't think anyone could give an exact answer. It's one that I certainly have signed back up for a potential another 4 years to try to bring my expertise into it. I think the real plan would be locking premiums so that they don't see those big tax hikes. I mean, if you're a starting teacher or a janitor or a bus driver making $35,000 for state employee, or a social worker making $22,000, you can't see those big. It'll bankrupt you quickly. So maybe doing things in terms of setting premium rates or deductible rates. I mean, there's going to be things like that. But to be an end-all answer to say, hey, here's free insurance, don't worry about that.
Thank you. Thank you. I kind of want to address something that the senator said, that yes, it is true, I guess, that state employees are paying maybe 40%. I don't know exactly, you quoted 40% of what sort of the typical market would be, but you have to also recognize that we have people, nobody goes into public service to get wealthy, apparently. So, we have to appreciate the fact that people who are public employees are not making market rate salaries for the most part. So I think there's a distinction there that you need to draw to say, well, that's true. They're not making market rate salaries, therefore their premiums maybe should be possibly subsidized a little bit by the system. I will agree that there is no silver bullet answer. And I know since this is based on salaries, I believe right now there's a 10 tiers of salaries for the program. And perhaps that needs to be simplified or looked at considerably to address some of the issues that people are facing. I don't think there is any one answer at this point. I think it has to be a comprehensive approach. So people talk a lot about the severance tax. I, like several others have said, the severance tax isn't necessarily anything that's stable that we should be going to the bank on for that. I don't think that's the answer. I would look at things like higher taxes on cigarettes, alcohol, sugary drink taxes. These are all things that impact our healthcare costs now, and I think that it's fair game to talk about what we might be able to do to raise revenue there. We perhaps could be looking at, this newly envisioned internet sales tax possibly as a source of funding. We need to look at future revenues. If the gas industry is driving our economy so much, then we perhaps should be taking a portion of revenue, income earned off of that industry, and setting it aside to address some of the issues with PEIA. The issue of examining ways to control prescription costs, it was interesting that Eric brought that up. I was under the impression that the WVU School of Pharmacy had actually worked with Medicaid, the state Medicaid program, to try to drive some prescription costs to that program. I didn't know it was $70 million, but I knew they had actually saved a considerable amount of money. And so I wonder if there isn't something there that could be addressed with PEIA as well. I don't know. I think we need to think a little bit more creatively. I don't know if health savings accounts can come into play for PEIA folks. I would be the first to admit the insurance industry is a very complicated industry, and I will be the first one to tell you right here and now that I don't understand all the nuances of it. But I do think it has to be a comprehensive approach to the point of some have talked about the wellness plans. That has to be a really integral part of it. And I agree that we have to incentivize people instead of punishing them to participate. But we have to, I think, also maybe lower some of the barriers to access for those incentive programs. As I understood it, when I was talking to one gentleman who's on PEIA, it was very prescriptive about what you had to do, when you had to do it, what kind of documentation you had to have. And it almost came to, when you're a person juggling your job, your family, and everything else, it almost becomes a disincentive to participate. So I think we need to maybe lower some of the barriers to being able to use those incentive programs, and at the same time balance that with making sure people are accountable. If they're going to, the incentive is to lower your premium if you're accessing an incentive program. You do have to have some accountability to make sure that people are using it as well. So there's a balancing act there.
Okay, Mr. J, that's good.
Thank you. It's a, as everybody said, a tough issue, but there are, I believe, some approaches that we can take. First of all, as others have said, state workers and other people who are covered by PEA, and I think the number's now 220,000, give or take, could be wrong. Lots of people who take those jobs thinking, well, I'll work for less money, and but I'll get good benefits. And whether you like that or not, that's reality. That's what people have done, especially people in education. And in the state, I've noticed there really isn't the huge disparity between the private market, and a nice study to do, and the public market in terms of what people make. There is a disparity in the lower pay grades, but once you get to what I would call middle management or higher, the disparity is really not there anymore. But we need to deal with that. Here are some things I think we ought to do. Privatizing, it's close to privatized now, but that's not the answer. You're right, it's not the answer. If you think it's bad now, it would be worse then in terms of premium increases and the cost to participants. I think we need to look at, one thing we need to look at is what the city of Charleston has done. I have studied it. They have a primary care clinic for their employees. We ought to be looking at that for state workers, at least on the campus at the Capitol, and maybe at additional places. Provide primary care services right there on the site. I think it would reduce costs dramatically. I'm sure that the Blue Ribbon Commission, or whatever they call it, studying PEI, is going to come up with some other recommendations. For instance, people in border counties now are prohibited basically from going across the state line, even though it might be 20 miles, and being required to go 200 miles to some approved or somebody who's in the system. That's a mistake that ought to be fixed. I agree with whoever said that having it based on income is a mistake. It would probably be hard to change that. It ought to be more risk-based. I do think we ought to look at spouses being required to take coverage that they can get from private employers or other health plans that's offered. That will reduce the risk and the premium to be added. But let me finish by saying this. In the 4 years I've been there, we've never failed to fund PEI. What I found when I arrived there was there is a surplus fund, or it's called something else. And in the past, that grew to some pretty sizable amount. And what was happening was that money was being spent down every year instead of changing any benefits, tweaking benefits, or raising any premiums. And it got to a crisis point. What I think we ought to do financially is we ought to appropriate part of any surplus we have to PEIA's surplus fund. And if we do that, and we're successful as a state in having surpluses, now the problem comes when you don't have surpluses. But those would be my answers for the best fits that I have right now.
Yes, as far as PEIA, first we need to recognize, and I think it's already been said by Ms. Ellis, that PEIA was a promise to state employees for taking lower wages to provide work for the government. So let's just start from that. Instead of talking about how they pay less or it's subsidized by somebody else, that's the starting point. And our state employees deserve a permanent fix. And in fact, that is the first reason why the teachers went on strike back in February. And we still don't have a solution or answer to it. There's been no action and no leadership. I suggest to you that we can solve PEIA doing one of two things, or a mixture of them. We can either identify a permanent stream of funding, or we can restructure the way we deliver health care. As the first part, we've already talked about, and it's been mentioned, of raising gas severance taxes. That's a possibility. Ms. Ellis mentioned, and it was in the paper today by our good friend Tom Krauser, collecting those sales taxes on goods sold over the internet. I don't know, and I don't believe that that would be enough to satisfy and permanently fix PEIA, but that's something that has not been done, even though the U.S. Supreme Court passed its decision back in July this past year, and allowing states to do that. Neither has it been mentioned by anyone as an option or answer. So those potential sources could be permanent funding sources. The second aspect is trying to figure out or trying to restructure the delivery of healthcare. I personally think that what we have here in West Virginia is a wonderful university system. A lot of people may not know West Virginia is even a state, but they know WVU and they know Marshall University. And it's because those universities are known throughout the world through their athletics and academics. There are a number of students both in Huntington and Morgantown, and they are a shining example of what works and what's right in West Virginia. I believe that that's a strength of West Virginia that we can use for those PEIA individuals who like to have their care done by the university system, that you can anchor those premiums somewhat similar to what Medicare costs. So what I mean is, for example, in my line of work, I have some knowledge as to how the hospitals work here in the area. There are WVU residents and physicians at all the CAMC facilities in this area. WVU has clinics across the state providing everywhere from dental to neurological care. And recently they purchased Braxton Memorial Hospital and are on the verge of purchasing Jackson Memorial Hospital. Then you have Marshall University. They're expanding their healthcare services. So I think that if a member elects to have their care done by the university system, not only can you anchor those premiums, which is what people want. They don't want to worry about skyrocketing premiums. You take that off the board, and then you also pump money back into those universities. $950 million was spent last year or the year before on PEIA plans. And it would put both universities on the map. You know, it's akin to, I know they didn't do this in Pittsburgh, but I follow what happens in Pittsburgh because I'm a long-suffering Pirates fan. And their rejuvenation in Pittsburgh had everything to do with the fact that they moved universities downtown. Universities became more accessible. They provided more services. They, in fact, then employed more people. And that's a way you can change the economy in both Morgantown and Marshall and then throughout the state, even here in Charleston, because again, WVU residents and physicians are already providing care right now to a large majority of residents of Kanawha County and Charleston, West Virginia. So I think you can almost, not almost, you can kill two birds with one stone, both try finding a permanent fix for our PEIA members, which is a promise made to them, and finding a way to diversify and increase our economy.
We're a little over our hour. I did have a couple other things I wanted to ask just real quickly. So short answers, please. Mr. Lindsay, you were talking about WVU and what role PEIA in this specific discussion of higher ed funding and whether state has community colleges should save some money that way. Anyone have any strong thoughts about that? Do we have community colleges? Do we change the way we fund higher ed?
I think maybe we ought to utilize that for what we have. So when we're looking at diversifying the training side of things, if you can have the private sector, this is where they talk about apprenticeships and internships, things like that. You partner up with the universities. There have been some success stories here locally, even where, say, Toyota Manufacturing partners with a community technical college to give a manufacturing certification to work there or anywhere else in manufacturing. So
Okay, that is a good thought. I don't think anyone's suggesting at least I'm not heard to your colleges, community technical association goes more than that, not saying
I think it's intriguing the thought of combining some of the administrative support services, but right now, when you look at our college going rate in West Virginia, that rate has dropped 5% over the past 7 years. So that tells me probably two things. Number one, we've cut higher education funding and it's become unaffordable for many because the promised scholarship has not risen with the cost of tuition. And that's a problem. And number two, I think we should not be eliminating access to college, whether it be financial or geographic access. So I would not necessarily support closing the colleges that are out there. I do think there's opportunity to look maybe at how we become more efficient, maybe with some of the more administrative or governance structures. And I certainly am not an expert in that, but I would welcome an opportunity to explore that.
I don't think, beg your pardon.
Go ahead, sir.
Wouldn't say we have too many, but I would say, first of all, it was a mistake, in my opinion, to separate community technical colleges from those four-year colleges that they were attached to. I was against it initially. I think it's proven it's been a mistake. We do desperately need the community technical colleges to be very successful. But what I would say about the four-year institutions is they need to be different than what they are today. They can't be everything to everybody in every community, not just general liberal arts educators. For instance, Glenville used to be the Glenville Teachers College. West Virginia Tech used to be an engineering school. We need to get back, and they need to specialize more and be world-class at something in order to make their presence what it ought to be. And what? Well, I haven't, but some people think I have.
As far as, I don't think we should close down smaller colleges or even to disadvantage smaller colleges. I'm a graduate of a smaller college, and I'm pretty certain that if I had gone to WVU, I would not have survived. I benefited from the close interaction between professor and student. So I don't think that that's the answer. I do think that maybe we need to think about how to publicize the strengths that these colleges have. Mr. Gonch is right. There needs to be some specialty carved out by each of the colleges or some niche, because it is a marketplace at the end of the day. They're buying for either personal and private monies or public funds through loans. And so maybe we should do a better job as a state, making sure that people outside of West Virginia knows that Glenville College exists, or Concord, or Davis and Elkins. In addition, the colleges in the smaller rural counties employ so many folks. I can't imagine where some of our counties would be without these colleges. And not only do they employ people, but they provide us, I wouldn't say a certain lifestyle, but they provide arts and opportunities that need to be in order to provide our state.
I would just throw in there, I think everybody here on the panel is kind of, for the most part, in agreement. And before I would want to close these small colleges, I would look at wanting to maybe deregulate or look at HBC to give these smaller colleges some leeway to run their college more like a business, so that they can be more economically viable, because these are the lifeblood for a lot of these communities. And so, and we're a rural state, a lot of kids don't like to travel far from home. So, when you talk to some of these smaller, by the way, the bigger universities will have some of the same complaints. So before I would cut any of these, I would want to try to give them every opportunity to survive on their own.
Last week during the interim meetings, the joint executive session, the joint health committee said they were going to draft a bill to make it easier for the children to be exempted from vaccinations. Curious what people's thoughts are about that. Senator Kubo, as you're a physician, start with you.
Yeah, I don't think that was a joint health committee. That may have been
Children and families.
Yeah. I'm a staunch proponent of vaccinations. They've been proven time and time again. Look at so many conditions. If you look at the CDC map, oftentimes West Virginia and Mississippi are the other jokes, but it's like a halo. You just don't see anything. When's the last time you guys have ever heard of a measles outbreak? And to hear people say we should get rid of our vaccination policies hasn't ever taken care of all these children or even adults with the high fevers and losing fingers and toes and being infertile or passing away from it. So I think that's one of the things we get right. I think we need to continue it. I think you look at more liberal states like California, they've moved to our policies, not away from their policies. The vaccinations have risk, absolutely. There's nothing in medicine that doesn't have risk involved. However, does the benefit outweigh the risk? In every single decision we do in medicine, whether it be a vaccination or major surgery, you have to weigh the benefit and risk. The benefit far, far outweighs the risk. The science is strong on that. It may not be in Hollywood, but to medical scientists, the science is very strong. And so I'd be very opposed.
To follow on that, any bill like that would probably have to come before your committee. Would you run a bill like that? Would you let the committees have a say, or would we just mix it?
If the will of my committee, I am chairman of the committee, however, this bill or any bill, if the will of my committee wants that, I would be inclined to run that bill. However, what I don't want to do is if speaking privately to members and so forth, there's an overwhelming desire for that. Committee time's precious. There's healthcare is a big issue in the state. There's a lot of things that come before the committee, so we vet those pretty carefully. And they say, well, most of the bills that get put up, they go through. Well, there's a reason for that. We voted, and when it comes to vaccination, my Democrat colleagues have been my strongest advocates and supporters. They help maintain those strong vaccination policies. And so, if there was an overwhelm, then sure, I'd say I'd go for it.
Just briefly, the bill, please correct me if I'm wrong, the bill was to take the authority to grant exemptions for vaccinations, to take it away from DHHR work that the past few years and to give it to individual physicians. Is that right?
Well, that's the thought process, but there's already a very, and I would agree with some individuals that says in the past, if you had medical exemptions, it's a very cumbersome process to go through the DHHR. That's been corrected. They keep the record keeping, and certainly if there's a medical exemption, I'm completely for it. I'm not vaccinated, but what a lot of people don't understand, especially in West Virginia, where we're rural and the drug epidemic has affected so many households, and a lot of times moms and dads aren't raising kids, grandparents, that their vaccinations are really waxing because their immunization strength has gone away. And then if you get rid of those, what protects so many people's what's called herd immunity? So my vaccination may not have taken that well if I was sick at the time or my immune system wasn't the strongest. But the fact that everybody else in the room is vaccinated and their immunity is strong, that protects me. So, I think there's a lot of unintended consequences that come if you start allowing a big sections of our population not to be vaccinated. It's not just going to be children, it's going to suffer. It's going to be their older population. We're the first or second oldest population in the country right now. They're going to suffer.
Anyone have any different thoughts?
I completely agree with it. Probably one of the few things you are. I completely agree.
Okay. Senator Bullock, Senator Kubo, you are in coming weeks to be hearing impeachment trials for state Supreme Court justices. There's been some concerns, or folks on the other side of the wall, that the whole process has become more sized, that this is an excuse to just one court cleaning, for conservative court. Do you agree with that? Do you think there's any validity to it?
Well, no, I don't think it's become political. I think it could look that way, and I can see why someone would say that. But keep in mind, this came to us from the House, and it started there. There was a move to impeach Justice Lawford, and it kind of mushroomed from there. Now, I want to be careful and prudent and proper not to talk about guilt or innocence, because I evaded listening to any of that just because I thought there was a chance I'd be serving on the jury. So at this point, the Senate basically just doing its job by the Constitution, because these things were sent to us by the House. I haven't seen any or heard any, what I would call politicalization of this. It's just not about politics from anybody I've talked to. Now, I can see why it might look that way, but you look at the makeup, and of course, the Supreme Court was not nonpartisan until we pass the law that says it is. So you have Justice Workman now involved, and Justice Davis has now resigned, and so it's both parties involved.
Did you vote to keep Justice Davis in there?
My vote, yes, is public. I voted no to release her. I was one of the 15 yay votes.
I'm sorry, you voted to release her?
Yes, I did.
So where did you go?
I voted no.
You voted to keep the proceedings going.
I did, and the only reason for that is like Senator Dodge, I've tried to not read, because I had a feeling this may be going our way. And it's not right for me to, in my opinion, to release someone and keep other members in for the exact same accusations. Without hearing any evidence, I haven't heard anything that the House heard. I haven't heard any of the circumstances, the evidence. So to me, I think that would be improper to grant somebody something and somebody in the exact same vote, the exact opposite, when I haven't heard anything. So I'm not saying that it's not reasonable to release, but I would certainly want to hear it.
I'd like to say that she arrested me with free and read about it. This is other things that going on with the loss process or whether it's been suicide. I think absolutely this. The idea, and this isn't coming from the senators, this would be from what happened in the House of Delegates. The idea of impeachment over a group of us deciding that you have somehow mismanaged something you're allowed to do within your authority is a scary path to take. And I understand what it got started with Justice Lawfrey and the federal indictments. To continue that on into basically second guessing. And while I don't agree with what happened, all my members of the court, either side, and I am all for working to correct that in the future and not allow such sort of untethered spending occur. The fact that we're now looking to do as an editorial board, make the right decision, the wrong decision, spend the money that you were allowed to spend within your authority wisely. If not, we're going to not let the will of the voters be heard, but instead we're going to remove you and have you replaced. Is scary because unfortunately, as the sitting senators know, everything seems to eventually become even more politicized. My fears of what could happen in the future with other seats in government, in addition to the Supreme Court, it's just an awful way to go. I don't put that on these gentlemen who are at a different stage, and I think they were doing their job. What has happened over this point has been a very bad precedent for our state, and I think it's nothing but politicized.
I believe on this that we're the only state left in the union that the judiciary branch has complete control of the discretionary their budget. You correct me understanding that? I think we're the only one left that there's no oversight whatsoever for what happens there. The only constitutional oversight we have is an investigation through impeachment proceedings. So, I don't see how that's political when you see the kind of corruption they identified within AC or within, as they went on looking into the other things that became par for the course. If you're in the Supreme Court, there is a mode of operation that's despicable. I don't think that's political. I think it's being responsible.
What about the legislative audits? Would that be a form of investigation from the legislature?
The legislative audit. Yes. So clarify what you're talking about there on that part.
Aaron Allred in his office looked into some of the spending offenses, the justices.
Sure. Well, that brings it up. That's part of what brought it out, I guess, because you can also go look at the report that went ahead and passed that brought it out. That's a foreign audit as well. When you're exposing the expenditures, when you're spending $500,000 on a 360 square foot office, wherever that is, I would say that's unreasonable expenditure. So there's legislative audit, but there's not really an accountability for it. And so the only way there's accountability, the way I understand it, is through an impeachment process with the way our Constitution is set up this morning.
Other than the voters.
Sure, you have voters, but they still got, there's terms in that office right there that you're,
And there are reasons why the judiciary needs to be separate from legislative. That's another risk we're running by this happening. And that's even more scary.
The only thing I would add, the question being, has the process been politicized? I still don't know or understand why. The evidence is pretty substantial against Justice Lawford. Yet he's the last one to go on trial after election day. And I know there have been suggestions about he's got a federal case, he's going to be in federal court. But it seems to me, by looking at all the justices, and if you assume all the allegations that true against Lawford is the one that I would assume would be taken first, but hasn't been, and in fact will not go until after election day. And that doesn't make sense to me.
Judge Farrell got to make that call, and I think there was a motion in the law for defense that he had these federal charges pending and they had to prepare for them, which is why I think they put it in.
The only thing I'm trying to about politicizing all this is judges should be. That's one of the things we try to do. Has to go to get partisanship out of there because even if those guys are Republican or Democrat, the reality is if they run for office again, they're going to have to build a base of that's their decision. So I think one of the best things we did is got that out of West Virginia. So a judge should be fair and balanced, and you shouldn't have to worry about what party you come into election. You might have to try to get close or step up to. So this for me is there's nothing about it.
I'm more concerned about the potential for somebody getting elected with 12% of the vote. Because there's like people.
Right.
Yeah, I think we need to address that.
Yeah.
Senator, you concerned us, you were at least tangentially involved in the bonds for the cycle program or the 7%.
Yes, sir.
How's that going?
Better. It's on track. Just to give you a quick synopsis of what I think happened, I don't know that this is what our report would say, but I believe the state applied for HUD money, never thinking they'd get $150 million, and they got $150 million, and they didn't know what to do with it. And somebody said, well, we know we can't spend that on housing, and so we want that in commerce because there's a good chance, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we can move some of that to economic development or some other legitimate expenditure which is allowed by a grant.
And when you say someone signed, she did someone
Or commerce, maybe lobbied for it, because they did. They wrote me a letter and said it's urgent that we get it in commerce. That was when we passed the original bill establishing the placement of it. And since then, they hired the contractors, I believe, which they thought would take this and run with it, do a good job with it, who've done it before, and it just didn't happen. I believe commerce was over its head in terms of how they was going to manage its funds, and the result is what you have seen. Now, General Hoyer's basically taken charge, and as you think about what military people do, they have it at least running like it should run. And I still think we'll end up at the end not spending the entire $150 million on housing. The other thing that happened was the nonprofit community, the Mennonite church, they went in and they were just moving it like that. They built 500 houses before commerce could even decide which bank they were going to put the money in. So it kind of goes to show you how government bureaucracy, and there are rules and regulations with these HUD dollars, environmental concerns, archaeological concerns. They have to jump through all these hoops. They weren't prepared to do it.
I'd like to just comment on this, because I think this was a particular instance where my knowledge of community development would have been very helpful. I would never have put those funds in commerce. I would have looked towards the West Virginia Housing Development. They They typically administer the state's housing money. They have the infrastructure in place, they have the procedures. They also have a history of doing economic development work with their funds as well. I think that would have been the more appropriate place to put it. I am concerned that that the time lag, that it took so long to figure out that nothing was happening. And I had a little bit of personal experience because I had a project that was impacted by the flooding, and some of those dollars potentially could have been accessed. And it was extremely difficult to get answers from anybody. Just as the people who were trying to get answers on the housing, we were trying to get answers on our project, our multifamily housing project that we worked on. So, and I feel that, having somebody in the Senate who understands more of the agency functions, and I've worked with so many of the different agencies out there, would have been a great benefit at that point.
Can I follow up with the Senator real quick? Okay. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned the RISE program went from public commerce, and you also, the Joint Legislative Committee on Oversight, the Joint Legislative Committee on Flooding had an oversight role with the RISE program that seemed to have really not been executed. There were reports that weren't getting to the committee, there were meetings that weren't being posted. Was there an issue of oversight from the legislature with the RISE program?
Well, we wrote letters and asked for those reports that we weren't getting, which you've been on top of that pretty well. Was there an issue, which you questioned?
With oversight, the issue boiled over to a head in May or June, but there's something going on.
We're supposed to have been getting quarterly reports, and there's
Should the legislature maybe have done a better job?
perhaps, but you're meeting in interims, and most of the people have jobs that they're concerned with back at home, and so you anticipate that the requirements that you've laid out will be met, and that the government agencies will do what they're supposed to do. And finally, ultimately, the legislative oversight did occur. Themselves is right. And I'm on the record, I think in the first meeting, is saying that we should involve the West Virginia Housing Development Fund because they had experience working with HUD.
If I could just, there is a role for government, okay? As I said from the outset, government should be working for the people. And the role of government for RISE Flood was legislative oversight. This catastrophe did not happen too long ago. An area that's part of the 8th district that was hit hard was Clinton. You would think or expect that whoever is responsible for the oversight would not wait for a report that would inquire as to what's going on. And if it were just that aspect, we all make mistakes, okay? But it's a continuation of this, this lack of, I wouldn't say interest, but this lack of confidence, because the starting point is government should be out of everything. And so, you could look at, for example, the teacher strike I go back to went on far too long, and it was because of not understanding and talking to people, I believe. You can go to the fact that it was reported not too long ago that West Virginia DHHR was spending $1 million for space that they didn't use. That lays at the feet of the leadership in the legislature. And then from what I said from the very outset, we have an Office of Drug Policy, yet no one in leadership is demanding a report, demanding answers, because what's so bad about it, it's not just a health crisis, it's an economic crisis. And there's no leadership, there's no solutions provided. We've had interim sessions or special sessions for issues much, much smaller than this. If you assume that the numbers from the Metro News report just a week ago are right, that half of West Virginians know someone or is related to someone with an addiction issue. And the fact that we haven't moved on that, I believe, is just a total and wholly lack of leadership and confidence on behalf of the leadership in the state legislature.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about executive branch issues. What could the legislature do about DHHR's issues or the Office of Drug Control Policy? I think both of those are under government.
Well, the Office of drug and policy, I would not doubt is under the auspices of the governor. But if you talk to people in Raymond, or on the west side, in Eleanor, in Clendenin, they suffer with addiction and opioid abuse throughout their areas. And as a representative of those areas, you should send a letter and demand something be done from that particular administrative office, because nothing is being done. And we need to move on that. We need to provide solutions. I'll be happy to offer some solutions if asked, but I don't know how much time we have.
We want to wrap it up.
Okay.
I do want to, I'm curious, because a lot of questions have been directed to a lot of people. Ms. Amy already hasn't had a question. I don't have a question. Anybody have,
You want to weigh in?
or anything you want to weigh in on that we
Right,
discussed?
I'm a listener. So I'm weighing in my head, so I'm just taking into account everything you're basing. I'm kind of typing in some little notes here for myself. I'm not gonna pretend to know everything that I'm going to need to know, when I get in the Senate. Obviously, everybody at this table can say that if they're honest, If there's not an answer that I have, I will work really hard to find it. I'm a teacher. What we do best is research, provide documentation. So I like to try to use that. That's what I'm doing here, making some notes, thinking of, okay, maybe we'll get to this and maybe we'll get to that. The main thing that I want to say is, I'm listening to Senator Gotch and listening to Senator Kubo. I did have a little comment to make about the vaccinations, if possible. I was thinking back to a conversation I had with a friend of mine, and she's really an advocate for allowing kids to come into schools without vaccinations. She has a child who ended up being allergic to vaccinations. It almost killed him. So she's really stayed on me to try to see that. So when it comes to that, I think that like listening to physicians and doctors, I really think we need to value their opinions on that. Now, I don't know what the right answer is. I've asked our school nurses, and I believe that, and I have friends, unfortunately too many friends who have children with cancer. And they proposed this to me. They said, think about it this way. My child has cancer and I want them to get back to a normal life as quickly as possible. And they go into a school system where children are there that are unvaccinated and they have a weakened immune system. That opens them up to even more problems. We have enough problems. And I think we need to start thinking about, the majority of people instead of the minority. Seems like the minority is a little bit more vocal, and we hear a lot of people, the ones that scream the loudest are smaller groups, and the majority of the people that aren't being loud don't agree with that. So I've been trying to look at two different angles, and what I'm down to on the vaccinations is, as a teacher, it's scary. It's scary if you allow children to come to school unvaccinated. I think there's a reason that needs to stay in place, and we need to listen to physicians and doctors and nurses. After all, that's what we go to them for, right?
Just one thing, and I completely agree with everything you said, but it may be the teacher that's the one that's most affected by children. But there is a medical exemption already in place in Senator Graham. I'll just make that up so that they know that if he or she had that, they can go, because you're still going to protect them when you're talking about small. But if they get hold of the state medical officer, which unfortunately he's John, there is an immunization officer that there is a medical exemption.
I want to say that. She was focusing a lot on, that's her personal story, but she was focusing on religious and even psychological things, so philosophical reasons.
As I said at the hearing last week, I think 90% of the medical.
With that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you to everyone for
Thank you all.
Thank you for the opportunity.